Who am I? I don't mean this in a deep and existential sort of way. I mean, literally, if you wanted to know who I am and what I am about, what would you do? In today's world, you basically have three options. You could ask me, "Hi, who are you?" You could ask someone else, "Psst, who is that?" Or you could Google me. Perspective taking, understanding who a person is and what they're about has taken on a completely new dimension with the advent of digital media. That new dimension, behavioral data. We now live in a world where what you do online is as telling as what you do offline. And so much of life today happens on connected devices, like tablets, smartphones, wearables, smart speakers. And with advancements in data technologies like tracking and analytics and data storage, we as a society now have the ability to track virtually everything and anything we do with or through these connected devices. And that's why today I'd like to talk about what behavioral data is and how we can use it to deepen our empathy for others. On one hand, we have the information we intentionally share. This includes personal information like your name and birthday and hometown, as well as information about your likes and interests and preferences. Then there's the information you implicitly share. These are insights about yourself based on the websites or apps you frequent, the transactions you make online, or the content you engage with. This is what is known as behavioral data. It's the information produced based on what you do online. That combination of personal information and behavioral data results in an infinite number of data points that today can now be aggregated, analyzed, parsed, and reframed to form a picture of who a person is. In fact, every company that you're interacting with through a connected device is using the data they collect on you to form a picture of who you are. For example, if we go back to my initial question, who am I and what am I about? Ask LinkedIn, and they'll tell you that I'm a strategist at a design and innovation company, and that I have a background in education and media studies. Now ask Amazon, and they'll tell you that I'm a person who likes to read, especially books about design, business, technology, and crazy rich Asians. Now ask YouTube, on the other hand, and they'll tell you that I'm a K-pop fan who has an eclectic interest in things like food, skincare, and Mr. Rogers. Yeah. Whether I like it or not, the internet is littered with digital snapshots of who I am and what I am about. And much like their analog counterparts, these snapshots offer an intimate picture of who I am at a given moment in time. A key difference, however, is that these digital snapshots are just as much about what I do as they are about what I choose to present. So I work in tech, and in the technology world, behavioral data is extremely valuable. For decades, tech companies have tracked our every click, hover, and input, and used that data to form a picture of who we are as users and what we need or want. Something that tech companies have appreciated for a very long time, and that we as consumers are just beginning to experience for ourselves, is that technology enhances our ability to understand people through behavior. Case in point, Facebook. Clap if you've checked your advertising preferences in Facebook. Anybody? Well, you might want to, because I did, and apparently, based on my online behaviors, Facebook has discerned that I have an interest in fashion, food, and tech. And well, they're right. Fashion, food, technology, these are all topics of interest to me, and I quite like the fact that as a result of these categories they've associated with me, I receive recommendations that are more relevant to me. Like it or not, we live in a world where we will increasingly come to rely on behavioral data to understand who a person is and what they need or want. For example, in the near future, healthcare providers will use data on patients' daily activities or home routines to help them personalize treatment plans. Teachers will use data on students' summer reading progress to help them plan for the upcoming school year. And who knows, in the future, when we're all wearing eye-tracking devices and connected heart rate monitors, TEDx organizers will use audience behavioral data to help presenters like myself plan the perfect TED Talk. It'll be amazing. Now, a critical drawback of behavioral data is that it can encourage those that are relying on these data-driven snapshots to make gross inferences about a person. Let's go back to my Facebook example. Based on my behavioral data, Facebook has reduced me down to a bunch of hashtags, to a bunch of keywords. In fact, Facebook is reducing all of us down to hashtags based on our online behaviors. The problem with hashtags is that without the proper context, they're very one-dimensional. And these hashtags can be used to stereotype us or put us into boxes that we never checked. The reality is, as connected devices become more ubiquitous and data technologies like analytics and tracking become more accessible to all of us, we'll soon become accustomed to tracking all behaviors, both offline and online. And increasingly, we will all come to rely on that behavioral data that we collect to understand who a person is and what they are about. So when that happens, when we're all relying on behavioral data, how do we make sure that we don't go down the route of Facebook? That we don't inadvertently stereotype people based on their behavioral data? The answer is to examine behavior in context. The beauty of behavioral data is that if captured accurately, it's objective. And behavioral data can be correlated with situational factors like time or location. Say, for example, we tracked how often I socialized within the past year. Now, even if I choose to present myself as outgoing, which I tend to do in a professional context, the data doesn't lie. With the exception of the holidays, I'm less professional go-getter and more hibernating bear, dormant in the winter and active as the weather warms up. A limitation of behavioral data is that it doesn't offer insight into what's driving a person's behavior. And when you see a really clear trend or clear pattern in someone's behavior, it can be easy to infer why you think a person is behaving the way they do. Say, for example, we looked at my activity, or lack thereof, and I were to ask you, what do you think explains that trend? Why that dip in activity there? What would your answer be? Now, if I were you, and clearly not me, and I had to guess, my conclusion would be weather. I think Anna really doesn't like going out in the winter, and she'd possibly die in the Spokane winters. Well, if you thought that, you wouldn't be wrong. I don't deal very well with cold weather. But that's not the whole story. This is Eddie. Something you don't know about me is that I lost my husband, Eddie, about 2.5 years ago. Now, as you might imagine, that has had a profound impact on how I go through life. Seasonal changes in weather do impact me. But more so than that are important dates within my history with Eddie. And these dates, in turn, have had a huge impact on my emotional resilience throughout the year and my desire to engage with the rest of the world. Now, I share this personal backstory with you today to show you that context matters. And context isn't just the what and when of a person's behavior, it's also the why. And if you didn't have that backstory and you only have the data to rely on, you can see that it'd be quite easy to classify me as a hashtag homebody or a hashtag antisocial butterfly. Behavioral data can be a very powerful tool. It's factual, it empowers evidence-based decision-making, and it gives us something concrete that we can all examine together. A limitation of behavioral data, though, is that it only provides you part of the story, and it encourages you to fill in the rest. You can think of behavioral data like dots of information, dots of data. And it's only when you connect the dots, when you make a conscious effort to understand the story behind the behavior, that you begin to develop a more complete understanding, a more complete picture of why a person behaves the way they do. One that doesn't rely on your assumptions or your stereotypes. So then, when you get that behavioral data, how do you make sure you're connecting the dots, that you're seeing the complete picture? Well, in the product design world, where I come from, we develop something called behavioral archetypes. These are structured models of end users or customers. They're behavior-based profiles of the people we are designing for. These behavioral archetypes help us to challenge our assumptions. They help us to develop a more complete understanding of who a person is and what motivates them and how they behave within a specific context. This, for example, is what a behavioral archetype might look like if you were interested in understanding who I am and how I behave as a person grappling with grief. To build something like this, we begin by talking to people. We interview a representative sample of end users. This step is really important because rather than relying on our assumptions, we challenge ourselves to learn directly, to learn firsthand about who people are and their stories. We learn about their aspirations and their goals. We learn about their needs and their frustrations. And we learn how they think and feel and act within a given context. As an example, a few years ago, my colleagues and I teamed up with Philips Sonicare on their first ever Bluetooth-connected toothbrush. It's a power toothbrush that pairs with a mobile app. And if you've ever, I know, what? Why would you need that? Well, if you've ever tried to get a kid to brush, you'll know that it is very difficult. It's not easy, and good luck trying to get them to brush their whole mouth. The prevailing assumption at that time was that kids hate brushing. So what we need to do was figure out how do we make brushing your teeth fun for kids? Now, it was only after extensive research that included interviews with kids as well as their parents and in-home observations of kids during their brushing routines that we uncovered an important insight. Kids actually don't hate brushing their teeth. What they really hate is having to stop whatever it is they were doing in order to brush their teeth, or they saw brushing as the start of something they really didn't want to do, like getting ready for bed or getting ready for school. This insight about kids and their brushing context helped us to see that the key wasn't make brushing fun, it was how do we give kids a greater sense of control to help them feel empowered in the situation. This ultimately led us to build a brushing experience in the app that's centered around an adorable little furball creature named Sparkly. I hope you look it up. He's adorable. And Sparkly has really short arms, so Sparkly can't brush its teeth. And it's only when kids brush their teeth that they were able to help Sparkly clean its teeth. Yeah. It's good for adults too, not just kids. Feel free to like it. I share this example with you today to show you that when you take the time to understand people, especially within their own environments, you develop a more complete understanding of who they are, of how they feel, and what they want, and what motivates them within a given situation. And these insights help you develop more contextually rich profiles of the people you're trying to help. This process of developing behavioral archetypes is a great exercise in empathy building. It ensures that product designers aren't just lumping people into generic buckets, like millennials and baby boomers, or even worse, making assumptions about why a person behaves the way they do. This process of developing behavioral archetypes ensures that we are paying close attention to people's goals, needs, and pain points, not just the obvious details. And when we're thinking about multiple groups of people, it helps us to think about where do their goals and needs overlap, and where do they differ? We are living in a world where we will increasingly come to rely on behavioral data. The key, however, is to examine behavior in context, to make sure that we are getting to the story behind the behavior, that we are connecting the dots. Behavioral archetypes aren't just a tool for product designers. They're an approach to understanding people or building profiles of people that anyone can use to deepen your understanding. My hope is that as we move into this future where we are relying on behavioral data, that we will look at the complete picture. We'll challenge ourselves to avoid relying on our assumptions or stereotypes. I have news for you. Data is coming. We will all eventually gain access to behavioral data on the people we're trying to help. It might be their social media data. It might be data on their daily activities. When that happens, when you gain access to behavioral data, I hope that you will pay attention to 3 things that I talked about today. Behavior. What do you notice about people's behaviors? Do you notice any patterns? When do they seem to deviate from their patterns? Motivations. What's driving their behavior? What's making them act the way they do? What are their goals and what are their aspirations? And what's getting in the way of those goals? And last but not least, context. What are those situational factors, perhaps surrounding people or physical environment? What are those factors that are influencing their behavior? When do they feel empowered? When do they feel less in control? When do they need your help? Now, before I wrap things up, if I may return to my initial question one last time, who am I and what am I about? Well, in this context, up here on this stage, I am a person who is not accustomed to being so open in front of strangers, definitely not a theater full of them. But I was determined to do so today, to show you that when you take the time to connect the dots, when you pay attention to people's behaviors, motivations, and contexts, you deepen your understanding of them, you deepen your empathy, and you challenge yourself to notice the multiple dimensions of a person and what they are about. Thank you so much.